Hello, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Philippe Reynaert. I'm here to moderate the debate we will have in a few minutes. But I want to say to everybody that I'm really happy to be there, especially for the air conditioning. And so I want to thank Pascal Dio because this place is the coolest place of Venezia and the Lido. And so, more seriously, we are ready to begin with this big discussion we will have. And the discussion will be introduced by an expose by my friend Tomas Eskilsson. You know that for 4 years, Tomas, no? Yes, for 4 years, Tomas and Katarina and other people from Film Väst are leading a study about the future of the public film funding. And we are almost ready for the last conclusions. It will be presented in Berlin in February. And Tomas said to me, maybe it's the time in Venice to check some learnings from this study to come, and to check these learnings with producers. And so we will have the chance to have 4 producers, prominent producers, to speak with us today, and also an expert. I have to say a second expert with you, Tomas, but I will present them after, and now I leave the floor to Tomas Eskilsson, and I want a thunder of applause for him.
Yeah, thank you, and I guess I should say good morning to you all. To another hot day here in Venice. What I am going to do for approx 20 minutes is exactly as Philippe said. I will try to give some sort of status of where we are, because we are supposed to deliver the final answers in February in Berlin. And I already now would like to underline that there is no one answer to any of the questions or challenges that this sector faces in the near future, particularly if we look at this on a European basis. Because we will come back to this, but you can say that during the years, you can say Europe is more and more multifaceted. This has to do with the so-called market disruption factors, because they don't look the same in different parts of Europe, and they mean a lot when you should shape an audiovisual policy and practice. But we come back. Now I should try. Oh, yes, there is a new picture there. Even if I didn't touch the screen. That was sort of a surprise. But this is, of course, the core question. Should we reform audiovisual policies? Should we have a revolution? Or should we just stay put? And I think in our mind, when we started out, we felt a big urgency and need to change argument, but also to do something with the elements that audiovisual policies consist of. When audiovisual policies consist of that, that also means that a lot of things that happens in the sector consists of exactly the same thing. I hate PowerPoints. I will just inform you already now. Because what you can say is basically that we had digitalization, and on top of that, we had globalization. This is totally typical for a lot of other parts of society and different parts of the economy. And if you want, you can say that digitalization is the basic for globalization. If you should have sort of a quicker speed and a more dramatic influence of globalization, digitalization creates that. And you can understand this as a paradigm shift in our sector or just as some changes. And if you see it as a paradigm shift, it looks more or less like other paradigm shifts we have had in this sector before. You have a dramatic increase of the output of content. There is a bigger possibility for you as an individual, a person, to see content whenever you want, wherever you want, and how you want. That's basically been the basis for all paradigm shifts in this sector. From the TV set to whatever happened, or you can take a lot of other elements. It creates a change like this. The interesting thing with this is that a part of the sector really believes that we had a paradigm shift, or at least some dramatic changes. But there are also a lot of people in the industry that says nothing has happened. It's the same. It's a little bit here and there. Same business models, same players, same principles. Yeah. And if that is true, then it's stay put. But we believe, and I can say the more than 1,000 people that we have made in-depth interviews with, and also all these dialogue seminars, focus groups, and whatever we worked with, you can say a vast majority believe that there's been a paradigm shift in this sector. But what does it mean? All this, the digitization, the globalization, the continuous changes in the ecosystem is also something that you can perceive and understand differently. When we made the first study where we interviewed 725 persons, 600 from the sector, 250 producers across Europe, you can say that nearly all of them bear witness that they had made changes in the key ideas that they're based their business upon. Producers basically said, yes, it's very important to continue to own the IP, but our economy is linked to and based upon volume and margin, to create a volume of production and to have a margin in that production. That is what makes us survive. Cinema owners or exhibitors, they basically said, yeah, we can come back to this, we feel forced to screen a lot of films, but we strongly believe in less is more. And the reason why they think that they are forced to screen all these films, because we have more or less a 50 to 75% increase of openings in Europe over the last 20 years. So it doesn't matter if you don't believe in overproduction, we still have a problem that we have a massive amount of content in cinemas, a much bigger amount of content than before. And the reason for a cinema owner, even if the market is slow and not really recovering after the pandemic, is of course if they should have an argument for their exclusive window, they need to say, basically, we offer this for everyone, and this is the cornerstone that makes everything more or less viable, wherever you should be, true or false. Another thing that the sector wasn't prepared for and not at all used of is that the period of endless growth seemed to end. You can say arguments, particularly arguments about audiovisual policies and more money for audiovisual policies, and the economical aspects that often are included in those has been based on the presumption that there will be an endless growth in production, because there is no limit how much content we need in this room or other rooms, so to speak. We have an endless wish for content. And when you suddenly have that curve broken, that's been in at least big parts of Europe the last couple of years, everything from global streaming services, commissioning less, to economical problems for broadcasters, whatever, then that's how should we understand where is this sector right now? Are we in a position where it will look like a new normal? Are we in a risk that the volume of production will actually decrease? What type of things? There's so many questions around this specific thing, but for the sector, it takes away a core argument, because it will not be so easy to persuade decision makers that there will be enormous growth again. So it's wisely to spend your money on this field. Beside culture, art, whatever, you can also have a lot of economical growth, employment, new companies, etc., etc. All these different type of aspects that are linked to volume. What happens with that? We shouldn't talk about overproduction, because me and Claus, towards the end, we should quarrel about overproduction, if it exists or if it doesn't exist. So we come back to that specific topic, and you will probably say something about it in the panel as well. And something that definitely will mean something in Europe, the next already means something and will mean even more, is the authoritarian and illiberal tendencies that we have in so many countries, and also the growing polarization. And how should this sector, and I really would underline this sector, cope with this? Because this is, of course, a political issue, but if this sector doesn't engage in politics in a way, you don't need to say, I belong to this party or something, but if you don't engage, I think the illiberal and authoritarian tendencies will be a real threat for freedom, artistic control, but also for public investment in all type of culture and art. So it's a crucial question. And Philippe, you are really becoming worried already now. Will he stick to the time schedule or not? I will try to. Yeah. Right now we have a lot of reforms of film and audiovisual policies across Europe. They are not always easy to understand. We have a recovery grade in cinemas of approximately 80% if you look to the number of admissions. But you can say in the Reformation, there's an interesting move, because in many countries, particularly in Northern Europe, film and audiovisual policies moved in the direction of being platform neutral. And you can say that the transformation of film to audiovisual policies a little bit means the same. But today, in most of the discussions, and also definitely in most of the transformations, cinema and cinema experience are again on top. And is this, and it's not to be mean, because me myself identify as such a person, is this that we are cinema paradiso romantics. And we are so full in ourselves of the belief that the experience, what we really get out of it, is so much better if we watch the content in a movie theater, in the big silent room. And partly it's true, but partly it might be a difficult truth, because most of us in this room and in other rooms where we talk and discuss this, we go to specific type of screenings. We are invited. We go to festival screenings. But how much do we engage with the everyday audience who are in the room, but perhaps not that concentrated on what happens on the big screen? So it's partly, anyhow, how we should discuss this, but it's partly a romantic view. And I share that romantic view, it's important to say. But I think this is a challenge, and I'm not 100% sure if we can deliver as well if we go only for the cinema experience. We have a big question about if we should have selective film funding or automatic film funding. I think you will come back to that in the panel. I should say nearly nothing, but the tendency is moving from selective to automatic funding scheme. And with different type of arguments, everything for creating a system that might stimulate a better audience reach to giving a bigger freedom to production companies to decide themselves what content should we develop, what should we produce, etc. In Europe as a whole, if we look to the traditional funding system and the amount of money that exists in different type of tax incentives, tax shelters, production rebates, whatever they are called, there is 4 times as much money in those type of schemes, in tax incentives, in tax shelters, and than exists in the traditional film policy. So who runs the show? Even if it's included in culture policy, the small part is included in culture policy. The dominant part is run by economic policy. And how should we cope with that, the coherence, and how should we create something that will be good in the end? Because we started out believing this need to be culture policy, really need and should be culture policy, but that's a hopeless position in Europe. I think the only way forward is actually to create the compromise where we can marry culture policy and economic policy in this field. And if we should be able to do that, there needs to be much stronger coherence. The same type of thinking should run both type of funding, because then it can be probably something really good. Then something even more. We all live in a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. This is a term more or less invented around September 11. It's an American term. Actually started inside military intelligence and other type of intelligence. How should you understand the world you are working in? Then you can say that this term has spread to a lot of other fields, and a lot of people are talking about the VUCA world. And because you can see a lot of other sectors that lives in a situation that looks similar. And a basic thinking in the VUCA world theory is that there is no need and no possibility to use regulation if it's complex and ambiguous, or everywhere except with the mic. So, okay, if it's a complex and ambiguous world, then regulations becomes a very difficult tool because the world moves too fast. And it's too unpredictable. So you might end up regulating things that ends to exist or very quickly are just swept away. So how should you find good and necessary regulation? Because I think it's the same. It's nobody that says we should have no regulations. I will not talk about flexibility and agility. This is the main thesis we have used for the study, and I give you 15 seconds to read that. Okay. Oh, was it too short? Oh, yes, shit. Now? Yeah, great. You can say that there exist different types of audiovisual policies in Europe, and now we predominantly speak about national policies and national practices. It's been, for many decades, easy to find compromises that made it possible for these different type of thinkings to coexist, because we all could share some small and certain elements. But I think it's very important to understand those differences, and it's not only ourselves that says that those exist. There's a lot of academic studies, papers, whatever. There's a lot of thinking around this. So it's not only us, but from the beginning, you can say, these researchers identified 3 models in Europe. Something that first was called, and that's really difficult for a Swedish person to even say, it was called the Danish model. And as you know, in the Nordics, we are friends, but we are also old enemies. so it was not so easy. But then today, we perhaps call it the Nordic take of audiovisual policy. And then there was the very dominating model, the French. And you can say that the French model, a lot of countries in Europe say that they use the French model or they are influenced by the French model. But when you study their systems, you can see nearly no trace of the French model. So sometimes it's more about how you understand the French model than the French model as such. And then there was the UK model. And all of these models, and you can see a lot of mixtures here, they had some sort of lowest common denominator, you can call it, the dominating part of it. And in the Nordic, you can say this was about the citizen and the audience and their ability to have access to content in their own language, reflecting or with some sort of culture, significance, and reference to their own territory, and with the wish that this content should reach and engage as many as possible. And then, of course, you can see other elements in audiovisual policies across Nordic, but how you deal with the industry as such has a very much lower position than, for instance, in the French model. Because if you read CNC's mission statement, the first sentence is about to make the French audiovisual industry even stronger than it is today. So it starts with the French audiovisual industry, and particularly with the independent producer, today more perhaps independent, understood as independent content. And it ends, the mission statement ends with the territory, the French territory, and really to be a tool for the French territory. And that's a totally different take. And the word audience is not mentioned one time in the mission statement, not one time. Then you can say in practice, the French model, because I think it's super clever, includes elements that will give strong audience effects and really makes it possible for French content to reach a lot of people. But it's not the starting point. And then we can be a little bit mean. But I will say if you look to the total of money spent in the UK for this area, it's maximum economic output. Of course, then you can see BFI with another type of what they really should do. But since the combination of the tax incentive and also other parts in tax legislation has such an important meaning, and also that you can see this argument about the enormous importance of inward investment. That's something that is not so common in many parts of Europe at all. But it's a core. And I make this extremely simple. Everybody can, oh, you were totally wrong when you spoke about that model. But to make it as an interesting exercise, if we should discuss this, I think it could be interesting to see that there exists different type of logics. So, and now, since my dear friend Gus Koge, that I work with, he has created 2 pictures of the same type. So the next one will be exactly the same. So this will be my last one. But some of the things that also makes us different is that we fund our audiovisual policy in different ways. In the Nordic part, it's directly funded by the taxpayer over the state budget or the region's budget or whatever budget, but it's with a direct, you can say, relationship to the taxpayer, him or herself. While in France, as you know, it's levy funded. It's funded in an entirely different way, and that's also something that will mean something in the end, because if you have levy funding, there's a big chance or risk or possibility that you also need to give the funders something back. So it becomes more and more important, a bigger importance to balance different type of interests and find a way and a model to do so. So you can say we have different types, and then on top of that, you can say we also have very different decision-making models. As you know, in the Nordics, we have individuals with a contract, a time-limited contract that makes the decisions. In big parts of Europe, selective funding has committees. And in my experience, because I really try to discuss this across Europe, for people that lives in committee-based decision-making system, they cannot really understand. And whatever type of evaluation they do, they end up, the best will be the committees. But now I should be the Swedish or Nordic person I am. But what is the big problem with that model? Because there's a lot of criticism in Europe about bureaucracy, slowness, lack of dialogue. And I can say that the Nordic model with individual consulants solves this, because it's a much stronger dialogue, it's much faster decision-making. So you can actually get some good out of that model, and it's not so that you necessarily means that the other model will be more objective and fairer and whatever. But it's an interesting discussion that we use so many different types of decision-making models. And then you can see something in certain part of Europe that is something in between. So all these things in the multifaceted Europe, but also, of course, this thing that in certain part of Europe, the global streamers have become major commissioners of content. They are powerhouses of also for local content. They give global spread. But what does that mean? And in other parts of Europe, the streaming services commission, the global streaming services commission nearly nothing. And this is an interesting aspect because it also bears a lot of meaning when you should look at how you create if you make a system where you have a streaming tax or streaming levy or whatever you have, is the logic and how you build the system is often linked to the fact where we are. Where are we in this? Do we have a lot of streaming services producing? No, we don't. Then we should stimulate them. Or do we have a lot of that, no, then we should try to avoid that they get a single, whatever currency we work with. So you can see this means something in the end of the day also, how we deal with different type of things. So in this last study, we have worked with many focus groups representing different parts of Europe, but also different type of thinking and sectors. And now we should boil down everything, and I have some good friends that are not here today. I'm specifically interested in my Estonian friend, Edith Sepp. She runs the Estonian Film Center, because she eagerly now I'm from she eagerly waits for the answers. I'm not 100% sure that we will make her happy in the end of the day, but hopefully she can pick up something that she can use to find her and Estonia's real answers.
Thank you, Tomas. We will try to make you happy today. It's the first thing. And Tomas, do you know, Tomas, is a way. Do you know what is a camel? A camel is a horse designed by a committee. So let's debate. No, it's time to do it, and we have 1 hour in front of us. And to debate, we are lucky enough to bring together, as I said, 4 prominent producers. And those 4 producers will have for us a debate between the north and the south of Europe. 2 Nordics, 2 Italians. It's perfect. We will know what is the truth about Europe. And so, I call from Denmark, Louise Vesth. Louise. Louise is one of the pillars of Zentropa. Everybody knows Zentropa. For over 20 years, where she has produced more than 40 movies and series. She was able to get the best out of Lars von Trier, but not only. You know, Louise, even in Belgium, we saw and loved Kingsland by Nicolas Charcel with Mads Mikkelsen. Ladies, do you realize this woman has the personal phone of Mads Mikkelsen? Happy you. Always coming from the north, but from the Baltic countries, Marija Razguté. Marija. Marija comes to us from Vilnius, where she created M-Film. It is thanks to Marija that, and thanks to her co-production, that even in Spain we know where is Lithuania. And so, Marija, the M of M-Film is Marija? Of course. Wonderful. To face those 2 strong women from the north, I will call now one of the most active producers in Italy. I call Marta Donzelli. She created and co-directed Vivo film in Rome. She's a regular at the Mostra, where she seems to have a subscription, thanks to Susanna Nicchiarelli or Abel Ferrara. How many films this year in Venice, Marta? 2, only 2. This is a crisis. And now, last but not least, someone who will embody the male quota in this debate and strengthen the Italian representation in this panel, Carlo Cresto-Dina of Tempesta Film. We owe him, among other things, all the film of this wonderful filmmaker whose name is so difficult to pronounce for a French speaker like me, Alice Rohrwacher. More or less. And then I had announced, we also will have an expert who will help us to synthesize what we are going to hear today from your producer, but especially the incarnation for years now of the Danish Film Institute, Monsieur Claus Ladegaard. I will call you at the end of the debate. And you promise me that you will not favor your fellow Louise Vesth in the conclusion. It's okay like this. So we have a lot of questions to discuss and a little time to do it. So let's go. And let's go maybe with a first big question, the overall situation of the sector. But as you experience it for the moment. So my first question for all the panelists will be, what world do you live in? Big question, philosophic one. I mean, in what context do you work as a producer? Does your government have enough cultural ambition? And is there enough public money to support you? Maybe, Louise, you can begin? I feel you are voluntary.
It's okay. We always need more money, but I think that's a producer thing. No, I think I will go into the content because I think the way I work as a producer, I really believe in the content. I believe in the final cut at the director. I believe in the selective systems. And I think, I mean, in my opinion, the world I would like to live in also in the future is that the public funding will not lose its power and its influence, because as a producer, you follow the money. I mean, I think the power of the money is the main discussion here. The money creates the content, which means that all the terms you put together with the money will create the content. So every financier, every commissioning editor, every regional film fund, tax break, whatever term they put together with giving out the money will kind of create or will move or influence the content. And as a producer, you need the money, so you will go extremely far to try to live up to these terms. So in my opinion, the public funding systems should be very strong, very well argumented. I mean, they need to know why they are there, and they need to know how their influence on the film, why are they doing a difference? I mean, will their money actually create better and stronger content, and what is that? So they need to have a strong voice, and I think, as Tomas said, it would be beautiful if the cultural money, together with the more market-based money, or even the economic money, if they could kind of live together beautifully. But I think if we move away from selective systems, if we take away the final cut from the directors, if we do not always try to, with all the things we know, select the best content, then we're done. And then we should all just make something else, some reality TV or something like that.
Thank you. It's a strong statement to begin, and everything is done. Marija, is your feeling coming from Lithuania is the same one or different?
I think it's very similar. I could agree on most of things with Louise, but also, as Tomas said, we live in a very multifaceted Europe. I think Baltics and especially Lithuania at the moment, we have like a very nice growth of the film industry. We are not yet over production or anything. I think this really concerns more bigger countries at the moment. But also the question that Tomas asked, reform, revolution, or stay put at the moment, I think we are also at the moment when we really need the reform. And I really believe that the driving force should be cultural policy, first of all. But of course we have to sit and talk at one table, culture plus economics, like make this culturenomics work. But the driving force should be cultural policy, in my opinion. And moreover, I think what is happening right now, that we are really losing the diversity because of the competition, because of the overproduction. Everybody tries basically to make a very similar thing to what already existed. And then it really becomes more and more difficult to defend very original and standing out voices, because they're somehow weird and not like everything else that exists. So I think that diversity also needs a very strong regulation. And one more thing, I also thought it really makes sense also to say here in Venice, when it's so hot and everybody talks about it, is climate change. And I think we also have to think how we're gonna work very soon with the changes in the climate, and maybe one day we will not meet in Venice because it will be just too hot to meet here. Yeah. But this is also something we should really not to forget to discuss when we talk about cultural policies.
Okay. Despite this difference of climate, we will do a travel now from Vilnius to Roma and from Marija to Marta. So, Marta, the situation in Italy is quite different than in the rest of Europe for the moment. Also speaking about reforms and so on. So, in what world do you live?
Yeah, maybe I would like to talk in what world I would like to live. Maybe that's the question. No, I mean, I really agree with what Louise said. I think that, you know, freedom is a very important word nowadays, and I think all over Europe, and for many reasons. Maybe we should also, you know, in this situation, it can be good also to try to remind how everything started in Europe. I mean, there is a reason why we have funds in Europe, which is connected to culture, and now, and the cultural exception, and so on. And I think that even if the world has changed, and of course now, you know, we live in a totally different world, it's very useful to remind, you know, this element, because I think that a little bit, I think we should reform, but also go back to basics, because it seems to me that basics are too often forgotten nowadays. In many conversations I hear, and also in many results and output deriving from these conversations. And freedom means final cut, means diversity in the contents, and means also access to those contents. And it's very interesting what was said about France, like not having the audience in the mission statement or whatever, but then, you know, in a country where still maybe, you know, distribution in cinema works better than in other places. And what I think, you know, has been happening in Italy now for a long time, it's that, you know, on one side, of course, we have, as everywhere, platforms, globalizations, so like a lot of contents, and in theory, the free access to all those contents, but in reality, I mean, of course, you know, we see what we find, and so I think we should reflect a lot on this access to content. And on the distribution side, at the same time, like on the cinema experience, on the other side, we live in a country where I think we we have quite a lot production company, few real independent producers left, but even less independent distributor left. And so I think that we miss, in a way, an ecosystem where, where you can make films work. So it's very complicated, I think, because now, you know, some films, some let's say, more difficult or different film seems not to be competitive, but most of the time those films don't have the chance to be competitive. And of course it's a very fragile line, because you know, you never, if a film doesn't work, you never have the counter proof that it would work in a different ecosystem. So this is a very complicated conversation, I think. But my position is that if we think big and if we think on a European scale, we should really start thinking how to create a stronger connection also between the fund and the real access to the content, and how to invest in education, how to invest also in professions that help us how to understand, to deliver those content, those different content. To the audience, and so really invest on how to nourish an ecosystem which, like all ecosystems, needs all kind of creators, so predators, insects, you know, plants, I mean, variety.
You add some more topics to discuss. It's a pity. Take your mic, Marco, because I have something for you, because I know you use a big metaphor to speak about public funds.
Spoiling. Yes, I anticipated when we did a preparatory Zoom call last week, I anticipated that I would like to start my intervention with a very important literary quote, which goes, extra virgin, I'm saying it like Tony Servillo, kind of thing. Extra virgin olive oil, superior category, cold extracted, obtained directly from olives and solely by mechanical means. What I'm trying to say is that when we reflect about public funding, public investments, we tend to believe the market is something given. What can we do with the market? I don't think this is the case. I would like to see a change in attitude. The market is something that is co-shaped, co-created by many forces, and public investment is vital. You will not have extra virgin olive oil extracted, blah, 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 cold, no, blah, blah. You will have a cheap, undefined oil with, you know, extracted with chemicals and boiling and blah, blah, blah. If it was not for massive public investment and policies that decide that the olive oil is good for your health, planting and growing olive trees is good for the landscape, and blah, 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 blah. You know the story. So the metaphor, the analogy with food, I like it, not just because I'm Italian. I'm actually a bit pissed off that when we speak about Italy, everybody goes about carbonara. No, we have Michelangelo. But it's similar because what we are talking about here is how we feed our collective identity and imagination. And the quality of food we give to our people. This is, of course, mental food. So I think we should let's try and go over the famous cultural exception. Every single industry in advanced capitalism exists because it's heavily publicly financed. This prosthesis that we all bring in our pocket would not exist without massive public investments. car industry would go bust without tourism, solar panel, blah, blah, blah. What do we want? We want public funds that are bold and courageous and co-create the market by, for example, start asking for conditionalities. I don't have anything against the fact that in Italy, big groups got hundreds of millions of public money through tax credit and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My question is, what did we get back from them? And conditionalities can go like gender gap, pay, inclusion, as you said, sustainability, and I'm not talking about the greenwash policy that most public bodies are adopting at the moment. I'm talking about something serious. But more than that, this is quickly, but more than that, about innovation. Let's ask the industry to innovate if they want public money. And innovation is not just technical. It's not just AI or VR. This innovation is not. Let's go beyond the cultural economic distinction. There is no difference. I only produce commercial films. When they don't find their audience, it's my problem. I did something wrong in the process. The best commercial endeavor I've seen operating is 16 films in London. They produce Ken Loach's film. The anti-capitalist, whatever we want to call poor Ken. They are a war machine, I can tell you. Finally, I think that what we really need as a conditionality is to protect the independence of the original producer. It's a long conversation, and I'm not even sure. I mean, it's a not independent original. I'm finished. Let's protect the original producer, not because of an ego that we want, to be protected. If you have an ego, you don't produce. You do something else. If you have an ego, you don't play the drums. You sing, you're the singer. It is because the original producer is the generator and protector of biodiversity. If we leave it too big, there is one phenomenon that Tomas didn't touch, and it's the concentration of power in a few rooms, in few hands, that can decide what is produced by whom. I'm talking about, there are groups that own 3, 4 companies in Italy and elsewhere. There are groups that own 25, 20, all fine. I'm okay. But if we leave it to the big groups, we will have a lot of beautiful popular plantation, all like all the same, beautiful geometrically. But let me tell you, fairy tales are not born in plantation, are born in forests. And forests are created by original producers.
We all discover now why your company is called Tempesta. And so we have to go on. Studies shows us that we are in a sector where the traditional demand for cinema is decreasing, while the supply of film production is increasing. So everyone seems to agree today that we have entered a phase of overproduction and that we should probably better produce fewer films. Okay, but who starts? The philosopher and writer Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is the others." And I think that we all claim that others should make fewer films. But if we reduce the number of production, do we not endanger the diversity? Marta, what do you think?
No, I just, start responding to one thing Carlo said, because I really don't agree about culture. And the point is that publishing industry is not publicly supported. Music is much less publicly cars are supported, computers, telephones, but culture in general, and I can tell you because, I'm the daughter of a publisher. Publishing houses in Italy don't even have like small VAT support. But there is, and maybe this is not fair, but that industry can survive because, to create the content, you don't need that much money. And so this is really the point. So I think that we can reform, we can revolutionate, but we don't have to forget that, our world is an industry where to create a cultural content, you need the money. And behind the money, there is some power, and politics are here for that. No, because otherwise I think that a lot of the changes that, we have to put on the table can be very dangerous if we forget this little thing. And I mean, about overproduction, I really don't know. I think that maybe in Italy, it could be true that it has been a little bit too easy to produce movies in the last few years. We passed from, when I started Vivo Film, it was really, really, really like to climb the Everest, to produce like a first film, and then, slowly the conditions improved, and in the last few years, of course, we had really like all these elements together, a lot of like the public funds increased really drastically in the last 10 years, and then of course, the platforms came, and so there was in overall a lot of money around. And that made our sector grow, I think also, with some positive results, but at the same time, maybe there was really a lot of contents, and not always the quality was there. And there was also a big factor of growth of the cost of the production. Like we had a huge inflation, which now I think we are going to pay hard, because so I don't have an answer really. It's very hard. Maybe maybe as all cycle, now the counter cycle that we are living now, maybe it will also have the result to adjust a little bit the situation, and maybe can also generate good elements. I'm very worried because I think that this big up and down that we are living needs to be regulated and accompanied by politics. I mean, politics are there also, to try to regulate those phases. And what we are facing now, it's like a moment where we risk like a total deregulations, because it's like all the counter factors are on the table, and that can be very risky, I think, for the industry in our country.
To contribute to the study, the third wave of this public film funding at the Crossroads study, I have a big discussion with people from the French CNC, because the situation in France is more surrealistic because of the amount of money that the government is putting in cinema. It's more than the rest of Europe. And so they say, yes, for us, overproduction is a way to sustain diversity. But in another way, they admit that diverse film from the diversity not to be seen because there is no more screen or a little place on the platform is problematic too. And so, Louise, I need your advice. Please give us a solution.
I think we had an overproduction a few years ago, but I think especially in Denmark, we have had to lower the amount of feature films produced because of the inflation and a financing crisis. It's becoming more and more difficult to find the money, and the money has more and more terms attached that makes it more difficult to use them the best way possible. And in Denmark, we do not, as I think one of the only countries in Europe that doesn't have a tax incentive. So we are, of course, also because we're only 6 million people, dependent on public funding. So I don't think that's a really interesting discussion. And I know that Tomas and Claus can talk forever about it, but I think that the more important discussion is how do we make the right films with the money we have, and what is a right film? Because diversity is of course important, but we shouldn't focus too much about it because it's all about the talent. It's the access. We need to create access for the talents in the first place, but we also need to feed the talents that we can see. They kind of have it. We all know when we see something that is really, really good. We all know when we have the really good package, and we all look for the original content. I think everybody should make a list on the films produced in their country every year and make the original content white, the adapted content, I mean where there's a book or something, make it green, and the sequels, prequels, I don't know what, fantasy
remakes,
series, whatever, number 200, make them red and see through the last 10 years, 20 years, how those white original content lines are just getting fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. So we need to step up, and the producers need to step up. We need to be the one who fight for the original content told by a voice that could not be told by anybody else. I mean, we have to look for the things that changes the way we think and the way we feel, that actually goes and create the freedom of society, the freedom of voice. And cultural, I totally agree with you on the cultural aspect, and you do not strike me as a person without an ego. I'm sorry. So I think we are egos, and we do make a difference, and it's our job to find the voices that can, I mean, we don't have to agree with the voices. We have to have the debate in the cultural sector. I mean, that's where we go to understand why why human beings are so fucking stupid, and why we are evil, and why we are happy and crying and all this. We have to go to the culture to understand why we are human beings as we are. We cannot make polite things about sustainability and diversity and all this. We cannot kill the difficult voice with all these things. We, of course, as human beings, has to. I mean, it's just a fact. We need to take care of all this. But in the decision of what films we should support, we need to stay true to the single voice, the single view on who we are as human beings. I didn't know. I didn't answer your question, but anyway.
No, but it was better than an answer. So we will give the floor to Claus to defend himself. in a few minutes. We have something like 20 minutes before giving the floor to Claus. So only 20 minutes to guess what the future will be. It's quite difficult. So I propose to limit ourselves to the future of public funds. This is the topic, and we change our method. I will ask you 4 questions, but only one of you will answer each question. And we start with Carlo. Okay. I have a big question for you, Carlo. Should public money continue to be distributed through selective or automatic schemes? I can hear more and more producers saying automatic is good because we can know what money we will have next year. But in another way, selective was the basic for cultural diversity. So this is, you have the floor.
Yeah, selective.
And 20 minutes for everybody. No,
I know, sorry. I was quick, I said selective. Selective, I like the idea that public, as I said before, they are bold. So if the state invest taxpayer money, as they like to call it, it needs to take responsibility on how they spend it and to whom. Very quickly, back to the overproduction. I detest that Sartre quote, and I'm happy to, I don't produce much, and I'm happy to produce less. I need certainty. I need IP to be defended, to stay with me, to create an asset, so I can grow. Probably, and this is, I know it's kind of blasphemy, should we move from financing project to financing companies? Whatever. But this is, you know, at the end of the day, this is, I mean, if you give me stability, if you give me in horizons of 2-3 years, I'm very happy to produce less. Anyhow, selective. Sorry.
No, but it's quite interesting because the next question is for Louise, and she already answered no. Because, Louise, I want to know in the future if you think that public funds continue to favor independent producer or independent productions. You see the difference?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know what I'm going to answer to that question because I believe in the content and I think the content should be the key and the talent voice of the content. Producers, in my opinion, my job is to make other people better. That's my job. And my job is to find the balance between what is artistic necessary and economic responsible in a way. That balance, that's my job. But the public funder's job, in my opinion, is to say, how can we fund films that would not have been made and would have not have been created if it wasn't for us? What can we do that the streaming platforms, the broadcasters, that whoever can do? I mean, that's the big question for them. So they should not give the money to me because I think that it's important to have that obstructions. So I need to define why should this film be made. And if I'm just having the money and I can use them however I want to, I'm not sure that the content gets better. It's something we do together. So they should definitely protect the project, the talent, and the artistic and the culture value of the project.
Thank you. I want to write everything you say, Marta, listening to Tomas, you and I are romantic people. because as a lot of people here, I think we believe in the future of the cinema theaters. But, okay, is this romantic attitude not a little bit outdated position in the age of the smartphones? And so, should public funds continue to think about cinema or for audiovisual?
Yes, cinema. I mean, this is my position. Of course, I think that it can be maybe, it cannot be the only, only target, but it should remain the major target. And I really think that, you know, I think that what cinema does is like also helping us using our eyes, and images have a huge power nowadays, and cinema and cinema experience sets a situation where you sort of also get the awareness of what an image is. And this, I think, is a very big tool for every citizen in the world. So I think we have this responsibility, which is political and also, you know, cultural and artistic. And I also think, you know, I had an experience for a couple of years running an institution in Italy, which also under his umbrella had the Italian Cinematheque. And I saw, for example, and I was very surprised how big the response from the audience was, like showing old films, you know, films that, and how big it was with young generations, films that they didn't have the chance to see elsewhere. And that gave me really, like, maybe I'm romantic, and of course this was a very punctual experience, but it was for me, and it's growing everywhere in the world of Cinematheque. It's really like there is a wave of, you know, like people wanting to go to cinemas to see, let's say, archive film or what is kept in the archive, and so yes, I think that. And I think that most of the young people sometimes didn't even, that there is this generation growing also in the pandemic, for example, in Italy, where we had cinemas. Some people didn't even have the chance to understand what this pleasure is. So I think there is a lot to be done, and I think it can be done. Of course, and this is the last thing I want to say, we need to totally rethink the model of how we distribute film, how we show them in theaters. There is a lot that can be done, and in Italy this is very problematic because, and for example, the new law for me, which it has a big problem because we can to really like enhance the possibility of films to work in cinemas, we need to be flexible, because flexibility now, I think it's a key factor to make a film live and stay. But maybe some films cannot stay, you know, every day, every hour in many cinemas together, but they need to have time to grow.
You know, Jean-Luc Godard once spoke about the fact that we used to say old movies. And he said, but when speaking about Proust, Balzac or Victor Hugo, we don't say old books. It's interesting. So we finish our tour with Marija, who incarnates the future. As you listen to Tomas, you learn that there is 3 more systems in Europe. Let's forget the UK because there are no more in Europe, they decided. So there are two big systems, one based of image consumer, citizens, and the other one more of industry. What is your feeling? What do you believe in personally?
I think I really choose the first one, audience, the consumers, because there is no black and white, of course. We can't say just this and then we serve what audience wants. No, I think we first of all start with a vision, with the idea, with the originality. Louise really nicely put it, and we have to defend it, and that's why we have the public funds, that they could help us bring these original, eye-opening, stunning ideas to the big screen. But this is why we do it. We're not doing the films for ourselves to run the business and just to keep ourselves busy. We do the films for the audience because we do need this feedback, which Marta just said, even from the old films, which we cannot call old films, but we always need to have this dialogue. So for me, even I think our film fund in Lithuania, I think they are the ones that also declare that we more follow the French system, but in reality, it's not. In the reality, we as producers, even if I work with very artistic, independent films, we always crave for the audience. We always want to have someone to discuss the film afterwards. So it's a bit illusion to say that, oh, the key thing is industry, it's us. I think it's very... we are important because without us we don't have the films in the end, so we have to be strong and we have to have tools like public funds, but in the end, audience.
Thank you. So it's the moment for Claus to try to make conclusion, and I have to thank Marta because she has a photo call, and so she has to leave us. Thank you, Marta. Claus, please.
I wasn't really aware that I should make some kind of conclusion because it's extremely difficult. Just, but a few reflections. Do we have overproduction? Yes, of course we have overproduction. 15 years ago, we were in discussions among European funders that then between 11 and 1,200 European films made every year was way too many films. Now, 15 years later, I think last year it was 2,400 films, and a substantial smaller audience are watching these films. But the thing is, and I think that underlines what Tomas said in his opening statement, that there's no one answer to this question, to the questions, all these questions, because do we have overproduction in Denmark? No. We fund around 20 films a year. A few years ago it was 25 films. Do we have overproduction in Lithuania? No. Do we have overproduction in Croatia? No. But we have overproduction in France, in Spain, in Germany. They produce 200, 300 films a year, and most of these films are not seen by an audience. So there's definitely a problem here. To a large extent, this is created by the increase of production incentives, because the production incentives tend to forget that there is an audience. It tends to be the production in itself, and I think it creates too many not watchable films. This is also, production incentives could be, I think it's a problem in some of the large countries. Is it a problem that Norway and Sweden have a small production incentive as an addition to their cultural-based funding system? No, it's not. Is it a problem that, say, the Baltic countries or the Balkan countries have production incentives No, I think that might be a progressive factor when it comes to building an industry. But I think it is a problem that Germany, France, Spain are having these huge production incentives. I think the really key question to answer is how do we make sure that production incentives and the cultural funds can work together? How can films funded by the cultural funds also access the production incentives? How do we make sure that the money, kind of ends in the same films? And I think this is what we have on a policy level really have to work hard to achieve. And I think it's been kind of among cultural funders, we have said for years, those incentives, keep them away from us, put them in another division, in another department of the government. And I think that's not true. We need to have all the production incentives into the old funds so we can make them work together in a decent way, making better films for the audience and also fewer films. Yeah, there's a lot of questions here. I'm not sure that I can answer all of them.
No, and I'm sure that Tomas will say something more. No? Oh.
No, yes and no, because I think it's a correct conclusion. I think it's one. I mean, this topic about how the different funding systems in Europe should work together, it's enormously crucial for films in the future. I will not say it's enormously crucial for drama series production, because of course these systems are used for both films and drama series production. And I think it's also something in the public eyes. I think it's where we are right now, it's dangerous, because as at least some of you know, you cannot say that tax incentives, production rebates, tax shelters give a positive economic output for countries. You have this big Norwegian study of their small incentive, and it basically said it's negative. So no, the taxpayer will not get their money back. You have a number of American evaluations independently made by university stating exactly the same. So $1, 7% gets back into the taxpayers, so to speak, pockets. The rest could be very useful to relocate or make it possible to do films somewhere else. But it's the argument that this is so economically viable is probably very false. And it's a problem because there is so many self-fulfilling evaluations of incentive systems across. So I think this should be included because, of course, we want to keep that money. It would be absolutely stupid to say that this sector doesn't want this money. But if we should keep it, then this should be included in the necessity of sharpening, reshaping the arguments for public film and audiovisual funding in the future. But otherwise, for once, me and Claus is probably on the same side.
Yes, maybe Margot is not.
The issue is to change the metrics. What is value? And I refer to studies like an economist that I happen to know quite well, called Marija Mazzucato, that at the moment is studying how should we measure the value of something like Tate Modern beyond the cash flow. Not talking the value, cultural value, we make people better. I agree with that. No. what is the economic impact of something like Tate Modern? What is the economic impact of something like Notting Hill Carnival? How do you measure that? The metrics we use to measure the impact of public spending are blunt, are obsolete. Let's change them. The studies, you know, plus, minus, it's much more complex than that. I think that for institution like yours, reflecting on how we measure value, and I'm talking about economic value, would be crucial.
I think one thing that we really lost for the last 20 years is the language about cultural value. You know, we are talking about economic value all the time. I think this is a problem. What is it? You know, what is the cultural value of films? It is that it can tell stories about ourselves, to ourselves, about all the things that we don't understand. That's a value. And in that respect, films can have enormous cultural impact. But we stopped talking about this. We are only talking about return of investment or economic value, and we will lose that discussion in the end. I think we need to reinvent the cultural arguments for films, and I think probably films are the strongest medium when it comes to creating cultural impact and focusing on things that we struggle with as human beings or as societies. And I think this is key to at least slow down the growth of incentives solely based on economic activity. I was once a producer, and I didn't give shit where the money came from as long as I got them. And I think it points to a dilemma for producers. We have 4 producers here today saying, you are all in favor of selective funding, but if the money available are from automatic funding, you will of course go and get them. And I would say, it strikes me that some of the real serious movements towards automatic funding or incentives in Europe has been producer-driven. It's producers that actually created the new system in Germany, which is automatic, basically. So that's a dilemma for you as well.
It's no more a conclusion, it's a beginning of a new debate. I'm the timekeeper, and I'm totally smashed by this. So, Claus, please say something about the humanity and the beauty of cinema.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with Tomas whether or not I'm a cinema paradiso romantic, and I probably am. But I also think that it's like we disconnect film and the big screen, film and cinema, and I don't think we can. I think that the big screen, is part of film language, and without cinema, without cinemas, we won't have films. We will still have audiovisual storytelling, and we shall have that. But the film as an art form, as a cultural form, I think will disappear if we don't have exhibitions in the cinemas. Was that too human?
It's a wonderful conclusion. So, thank you for all the panelists and the experts, and long life to the romantic.